Dr. Ayanna Abrams is a licensed clinical psychologist in Georgia, CEO founder of Ascension Behavioral Health, and co-founder of Not So Strong, an initiative to improve the mental health and relationship functioning of Black women through use of vulnerable storytelling. Her specialties include racism-based trauma, anxiety, depression and other mood disorders, entrepreneur, mental health, and relationship marital counseling. She has extensive clinical experience working with people of color, specifically Black people across the diaspora. Dr. Abrams has been featured in the New York Times, Essence, Allure, Mind, Body Green, as well as Afropunk, Therapy for Black Girls and Silence the Shame. Dr. Ayanna Abrams.
Thank you for that introduction, Maria. So I want you all to put in the chat how you have been experiencing today's event. I find myself, that's why I love these, I find myself learning information every time there's another conversation, particularly as it relates to Black mental health. So thank you for joining this segment. Today, I'll be talking to you about advocating for yourself in your community. And first off, I want to give you credit for being here today because this counts as advocacy. Right? Oftentimes we have these rules around what it must look like if I am this advocating kind of activist in these ways, but you showing up right here to arm yourself with knowledge about how to take better care of yourself, your loved ones, your community, and to be in community with each other in this way, this is the first step to advocacy. So if you haven't done this before, thank you for joining us today. I hope, again, you've enjoyed kind of what you have learned and that you are ready for a lot more. I have so much to say. So I will try to slow myself down because I get really into these conversations. So feel free to add information add questions into the Q&A. That's the best way for me to be able to see them. And I'm going to have a little bit of a Q&A after I talk about advocacy, right? So I've broken this down into a few different headings that I want to get into. So first, I want to talk about personal advocacy, right? So this is about you, and this is about how you arm yourself with knowledge about your body, about your needs, about how you are moving through any part of your journey. And then we can talk about how to connect your personal advocacy with your community, right? Who's in your home, who's in your neighborhood, medical providers, legislation, all of that. So first, I want to start us off with recognizing the importance of listening to your body, right? Listening to your physical body, right? We know when we might have aches and pains and, something in my lower back, something in my knee, a pretension up here, right? So listening to those parts of your body, but also listening to your emotional and your mental selves, right? I'm a psychologist. We talk a lot about how the mind and the body are connected. So advocacy in this way looks like, how do I connect with my body enough, right? And be in tune with what my whole body needs, right? To then access what I need, again, kind of outside of myself and or internally for myself, right? So listening to your body, which also comes with a practice of self-compassion and grace. And I know this is big. Some of the talks before, which have wonderfully communicated the histories, right? And the stigma when it comes to Black mental health, Black women's mental health, and the strong woman stereotype, right? We always have our cape on, right? That cape absolutely gets in the way of you being able to listen to your body, right? By nature of having that strong woman cape, you are telling yourself, I don't need to listen to what my body is saying about what I need because I need to do this instead. Right? That cape, right, puts you in a position where you begin prioritizing everything externally to you, and you get further and further away from yourself. You get further and further fragmented, right, from your body. This is permission to come fully back into your body and recognize that you are your main resource, right? And what a wonderful resource you have in your body if you allow it to take care of you, right? We want these things from our body. Our bodies do these amazing, amazing things like birth babies, right? But we don't always give it the honor back to say, hey, let me listen to what you are saying to me. I do a lot of demanding from you. I need this. I need this. I need you to wake up at a certain time. I need you to say this to this person. I need you to stay up late and do this. But what are you giving back into your body? And that's where the self-compassion and the grace comes in, right? Allowing this to be a very new experience for you, right? I work with a lot of birthing people and families, where people come in and say, well, I've done this before, so I shouldn't be feeling like this now. This is my second child. This is my fourth child or fifth child, right? So I'm having all this judgment, these questions about myself, right? I've read all the books, so I should know how to do this. I've listened to all the podcasts. I've read all the magazines. I've got subscriptions to, there's so much information now. I've got all the subscriptions to everything that's there, right? I follow all the mama pages, right? I go to all the retreats and all the summits that are there, right? I should know this better, right? And oftentimes we use that as a way to say, I shouldn't be feeling like this. So when I talk about practicing self-compassion and grace, it means allowing yourself to feel what you are feeling with no judgment. That what you are feeling in this journey is never going to be wrong, but you want to look at ways to listen to your body and advocate for yourself and say, hey, I want to honor what I am feeling by doing this. I want to acknowledge that my feelings are real and valid, and I get to respond to them by doing this. When we are not advocating for ourselves, we tend to cut all those things off. We fragment ourselves. And again, we have this narrative that because I shouldn't be feeling like this, I'm just going to pretend that it doesn't exist. All right. And what we know as healthcare providers, and what some of you also know, is when you ignore things, they actually get bigger. They don't get smaller. You can't sweep your body's needs under the rug. You can't ignore it forever. At some point, your body's going to come back and say, I gave you a chance to do this before. Now I'm going to start treating you in this way. Now I'm going to start doing these things, right? Because I need something else from you. So self-compassion comes in by allowing this to be a human experience. Right? That this is not something that you need to do perfectly. This is not something that you need to do with kind of all the mastery, right, available to you. But this is something that you get to try your best at in any given day. And that tomorrow's best might look different than today's best, might look different than Wednesday's best. But for you, being able to know that you have the flexibility to do what you can in any given moment, because this is a journey. This is not something for you to get right and to perfect. This is something to allow yourself to lean into the full process of all this comes with it. And I really talk about with a lot of my clients, allowing yourself to learn yourself in this journey. Even if this has happened before, even if this is not your first birth, this is a totally new way in which you're getting to know yourself. So allow yourself to learn what your body needs. If you don't have much practice at that before, this is now permission to allow yourself to learn what I need now and put the things in place to give me the best benefit in this. And this is also not only about paying attention to what's not going well and paying attention to points of pain and strain, but also paying attention to any parts of this journey that do feel that do feel joyful for you. There was a conversation that Keisha was offering earlier. What does joy look like and feel for me? So incorporating that also into your narrative. What feels well about this? What parts of this journey feel empowering for me? What am I learning that I wouldn't have known before if I wasn't on this journey? How am I able to see and respond to people differently in the world now that I play this role? It really changes your world. It really changes your worldview if you allow it to, and you allow room for you to change through this process. You are not required to be the same person before this and after. And oftentimes society does that. There's this disconnect and there's this dilemma where society expects you to parent as though you don't have a job and that you don't work and have other roles, and then be in other roles as though you're not a parent. And it can really, really strike a chord with this kind of disorientation. Like, who am I allowed to be in this space? And this is permission for you to be all of those things, right? That you don't have to lose parts of yourself as you're gaining parts of these identities, and to allow yourself permission to lean into them. So leaning into new versions of yourself is also a way to advocate for yourself, that you don't have to be any one way in this, and that week to week, month to month, year to year, right? Different parts of your identity will come up in this, and that you are allowed to change and grow through this process, right? Compassion allows room for you to be who you need to be for yourself, versus leaving you kind of stuck in the shame of, I should be like this, I have to be like this all the time, right? So not ignoring parts that feel good and parts that don't feel so good about this, but learning ways to respond to all of those different parts of yourself. This means listening to when your body is hungry, listening to when your body feels full. This means listening to when you feel a little bit more fatigued, but also listening to when you feel energized and like you got some wits about you and that you can kind of move around in a different way. Listening to when you feel weak and might need a break, might need a rest, and we'll talk about breaks a little bit later as well. But also listening to parts of this journey where I do feel strong. I feel like I got a hang of this, right? We tend to gloss over things that we do well. Our minds biologically, evolutionarily, are trained to focus on things that feel like threats. So oftentimes our memories, when we look back at experiences, we're only remembering the most negative parts of things. This is permission to spend time in what might also feel well about this journey for you. And if you need to write that down because you might not remember it, write down those moments that feel well. You want to be able to come back to those moments later, right? As you're giving yourself some information about how this has all felt for you. So I want to move us through some affirmations for advocacy, right? So I'll give you a few seconds. This is also while I get my cord, but I'll give you a few seconds to write some stuff down. So I'm allowed to be new at this. And I want you to put in the chat what resonates with you as I'm calling out some of these affirmations. I'm allowed to be new at this. I deserve rest. And not only is that rest deserved, but it's required for me to feel well. And it gets to be prioritized. I'm sorry, something's going off my cord. It gets to be prioritized for, I'm so sorry about that. It gets to be prioritized not only for me, but also for how I am well with others. I deserve to be respected along this journey. And I get to have questions. I get to not know everything about this. I get to ask questions when I'm curious about something. Here's a big one. I do not have to be the perfect parent. I want you to slow down around that one. I do not have to be the perfect parent. I don't have to be the perfect person. All right. Other than it being impossible, it's not necessary in order for you to give love and to be loved by others. I'm building a new relationship with myself and my body. My outlet just went out. I'll be very, very honest about this. I am also not perfect. Something's going on over here, right? I'm building a new relationship with myself, my body, my baby, my family, my community. This is the last one I'll leave you with. This is not hard because I'm a bad parent. This is hard because it's hard. This is hard because it's meant to be hard. Not because I'm doing anything wrong in this, but that this is a hard thing and I can do hard things. You're having a really unique experience that's yours only in this way. So you get to get the assistance that you need along this journey. I love it. Loving these affirmations, providing space for vulnerability. That's what we're talking about today, right? So here we also go, right? In terms of whether you believe you deserve these things or not, what are different ways to ask for what you need? You know, Black women have historically been denied access to basic needs and rights. Not only care, but our ability to choose, to be experts on our own bodies, our ability to feel empowered in our voices, and our ability to use our voice and feel respected in the world. I'm offering permission to you to ask anyway. You might not have examples. Oftentimes we don't have examples of Black women who ask questions, who say, I need something different. I've changed my mind about that. My body doesn't feel well. You get to be different. Even if you are the first one who's going to be different and the only one, you get to be different. You get to do this differently than the examples that you have. That could be your mother, your sister, your aunts, your grandmothers, neighbors, mama's groups that you're in, Facebook groups that you are in. You get to be different from them. Right? And now we're going to talk about boundaries, right? Which kind of connects and kind of goes with all of that. And again, please bear with me because something is significantly wrong down here with this cord. Your body, your rules. That's the quote. Your body, your rules. You set the tone for what you need, not only from yourself, but also from other people. And it gets to be up to you. We live in a world where a lot of other people, particularly white people, have made decisions about what it is that we need and about our bodies. You get to make these rules. And if someone's not listening to you, right, that's an opportunity for you to engage in whatever redirect that you need, so that somebody will listen to your needs. You get to find those people who will listen to what you need. Another boundary that comes up a lot, particularly with with couples who I work with, right, is around sex and romance, and what it means to not want to engage in the same ways in which you maybe felt able and capable to engage before, but now something has changed with your body. You also get to have boundaries in those areas. You get to have boundaries around your rest, around your nutrition, time and energy that you may have been able to devote to things in the past that you don't feel like you have this full access to now, material things. You get to have boundaries around those things, again, as you are building a new relationship with yourself, with your baby, with your body, with your partner, that things get to change over time. Oftentimes we feel really stuck and then we have to remain the same. I need to be the same that I was. I don't want to lose myself in this. So things have to have this kind of sticking point to them. Right? But allow yourself to soften, right, and kind of lean into what may be changing about you in this process. It's really interesting when I'm working with families and I'm working with mamas, and we're talking about boundary setting before our work, or maybe before they have become pregnant. I always say, like, your boundaries might look a little different. We'll give it some time. I'll give you some room to figure some of this out, and we'll talk about it as you move through your pregnancy. But I have a sense, right, that some of your boundary work might look a little bit different, right, once baby arrives. And almost like clockwork, there's something that happens after baby arrives, and mama starts saying no. And it's really interesting because what I noticed is that there's a willingness to advocate for baby, but it's still really hard to advocate for yourself. I will say no to make sure that baby is protected. You can't do this, you can't do this. I want this in this way. No. I got to make sure baby gets sleep and all this stuff. And I'll say, well, did you tell them that you need sleep? Did you tell them that you're tired? Did you tell anybody that you need a break? You want some rest? And they say, no, I don't need it. I just want to make sure that the baby has it. I said, oh, well, that's interesting. So it's not that you don't have the language for the boundaries, right? Oftentimes it's about, do you believe that those boundaries apply to you? Do you believe that you deserve the same level of respect and love and care and concern from others? And they say, oh, I never thought about it like that. I don't need much. The baby needs more. It's a baby. I said, well, you're not a baby, but you're a human in this. You also have needs. But there's this way that, again, I noticed that boundaries can show up. They can have all the conversations, make sure you're not touching my baby, you're not doing this, baby needs this and this and this, all stops, everything, by all means necessary. This baby will be taken care of. This child will be taken care of. And then I say, well, who's taking care of you? Are you taking care of you? And have you asked the people in your life, right, to offer you what you need in order to feel taken care of? I see it. Mama's needs matter. They absolutely do. Right? It's the cliche. I know it's more of a cliche. It's conversation or something that we say all the time. You can't pour from an empty cup, but that's very, very real. Right? And I'm seeing a point, right? Black women historically have taken care of everything and everyone before ourselves. Right? And it's come to a huge detriment, right, of ourselves. And also recognize, not to blame and shame Black women, that is systemic. And oftentimes we end up getting really hard on ourselves because of that, but that is really systemic. We've never been taught, right? It's hard to be what you can't see, which is why, again, you get to be the first example of this. If it will be you, then it will be you, but you get to be the first example of this, even if it confuses others. Your role in life, you are not put on this earth so that other people have to understand you. You are not put on this earth to make other people comfortable. You are not put on this earth, right, to make sure that everyone else is good before you. That's not what we're here for. But you are put on this earth, right, to offer room and experience and practice and modeling of authenticity, of advocacy for yourself, to continue to show up for yourselves in this way. So like I said, so if today is your first step at that, wonderful, glad you're here. If you've been doing this work, I'm glad you're still here, right? Because this is lifelong work. While we're talking about this as related, right, to mama's mental health, to maternal mental health, right, this goes really deep. This doesn't start here. This is an opportunity. This is an iteration of it. right? But it doesn't start here, and it also doesn't end here, right? So I want to move us into, right, some other ways in which you can remain advocates for yourself, right? So let's talk about advocacy with healthcare providers. This is big, big, big. I am always an advocate of arming yourself with information. We are in a technology age where information, if not almost too much information, right, is right at your fingertips, right? You want to curate this and be able to use this to your advantage, to be able to do your own research, right, on what's available to you and what you deserve. Even if you have no examples of it in your family, because women in your family did not do these things, you get to search for these things, you get to ask for these things, you get to engage in these kinds of practices. Right, so doing your own research on providers in your area, local to you, you might need to drive out a bit depending on where you are and who you are, you have access to that, who you want to connect with. You don't have to work with a provider because they are convenient, because they're already there in the hospital in which you go and see your person. You get to find a provider, and it's your responsibility also to find a provider who you can trust. Trust is so big in your relationship with your healthcare provider. It's not only about their skill set. It's not only about whether they can help you do this and this and this part, but do you trust them? Can you be vulnerable with them? Do they spend time with you when you have questions because this is new for you and you get to be a learner in this? That's who you're looking for, and that's where the advocacy comes from or comes in, right? Is this a provider who's willing to meet my needs? You're not there to meet their needs. They are there to meet your needs. So you get to hold them to that task. This is what I need. This is what I'm looking for. Can you do this for me and with me, not to me? I talk to clients all the time, not only in terms of a mental health or a therapy setting, but also in terms of a medical setting. Right? Do your providers treat you like you are the expert on your body? That's what you are looking for. I could talk for days and days about mental health and PMADs and all this stuff over here, but only you can tell me about your body. So I will never offer, right, any relationship in which you lose the expertise of your body and you lose that connection with your body and you defer to me, because this is a collaboration. And I want you to feel empowered in this. So are you connecting with healthcare providers who also allow you to feel empowered? They offer you information. They offer you guidance. They help you make the best decision for yourself versus them being up here as mighty experts and making these decisions for you. You get to mention up front and ask for upfront, are there Black providers here? I'm gonna slow down around this one because I want to see. Oh, I like this in my provider. I want to see, has anybody asked for a Black provider? I just want to see something in the chat. Okay, I do. Yep, always, yes. Okay. Looking for one now. Okay. Part of the advocacy, I get to ask for a provider of my choice. I get to see if they have that there. If they do not, I get to change my services if that feels really important to me. But you get to ask. You do not have to stick with what is already available because it's convenient for them or for you. And that doesn't stop at that care. That can also go towards pediatric care, any kind of care, doula support, birth centers. You get to ask for Black providers. At the time, hubby was in the military. Okay. Yeah. I'm glad to see that you've asked. You're already well on your way to that advocacy. Has anyone ever mentioned, right, that you're aware of medical racism? This is where sometimes my advocacy, because I have a lot of language for this. Has anybody ever talked about medical racism with providers and any worries that you have? Okay, yes, I have, certainly. Okay. For those of you who have, can you put in the chat what you've said? This can really be helpful for other people to have examples of what you have asked about and what you have said to providers. Oftentimes we don't have examples of the language for that. Here's the other thing, right? Not only can you mention up front, right, that you're asking these questions, that you're interested in this because of who you are looking for, right? But I also want us to reframe our language, because I hear a lot of conversations that say like, hey, this is important to me because I'm Black, right? I know that I know that I'm at higher risk for this or this or this because I'm Black. You're not at higher risk because you're Black. You're higher risk because of anti-Black racism. And I want to make that very, very clear. Your Blackness is not the issue. Your culture, your race has never been the issue. Racism is the issue. Anti-Blackness is the issue. So I can't have you leaving this conversation saying that I'm at risk because I'm Black. I'm gonna say that one more time. I can't have you leaving this conversation that I'm at higher risk because I am Black. You have never been the. I want to move on, right? Oh, did I have a question? Oh, okay. So I'm still trying to get this cord worked out. So let's talk really quickly also about organizational advocacy. I don't know how you all heard about Postpartum Support International, but this is a great start for you, right? There are organizations, right, that are local, that are national, that are international, right? That's also a way for you to not only get involved, but also to get information about what it is that you might need and what it is that you might need for your future. Right? So organizations like Postpartum Support International, 2020 Mom, Black Mamas Matter Alliance, Sister Song, Planned Parenthood. These are all opportunities for you to continue this advocacy, because it doesn't have to only be in one way. Gather information, meet other people and families in this. Right? Information can't be removed from you once you get it. Right? You might lose other things, right? But you won't lose this knowledge of who's available to you and who is actually in your community. Something that can be really big, particularly in this stage, is the isolation, right? And then you add in, right, COVID and sheltering in place, right? These are ways to help you feel less isolated in this. Today's a great start, but there's a number of ways in which you can still remain connected to support groups. And that's not only advocacy for you, that's advocacy if there is a partner in the home, that's advocacy for your family, if there are other children in the home. All these ways to remain connected so that you know that you do not have to do this by yourself and that you've never been in this by yourself. Ooh, I think I have a good question coming up. I'll hold that because we got a few more minutes before I get to questions, right? And the last thing I want to talk about, which is something that we don't think about as often, is legislative, right? Oftentimes we leave whether we call it politics or policies, legislation, right? Things that are happening in our state and in our communities to like a certain people. But this could be another way in which you might be interested in advocacy and don't know ways in. So I just want to highlight two things that are happening right now per our brand, spanking new vice president. There's the Black Maternal Care Act, which is a grant. I think it's for, let me see my notes. It is for $125 million towards equal access to quality health care specifically for Black women, which links healthcare providers to identify not only who's at risk. I know oftentimes we only talk about high risk pregnancies, but also anyone across the spectrum, right? And to fight against racial bias and the medical racism that I was just talking about. Also includes implicit bias training for providers, which is very important, but that's not the end of the work. That's another conversation, right? What's also going to be included in this is a Black Maternal Health Momnibus Act of 2020, which not only connects to, moms and mothers to be, but also incorporates veterans, women who are incarcerated, right? And oftentimes the names and the communities within the Black community that often get unnamed in a lot of this. Thank you. Senate Bill 464 mandates the implicit training, right? Because we are all a part of this. Not only mamas who we have access to, or not only mamas who have access to care, right? But also mamas who don't have access to care for whatever reasons, for their identities, for their careers, for their histories, or PTSD. This is how we all work together. So while you're thinking about ways in which you can advocate for yourself individually, in your household, in your community, right? What are ways in which we can also advocate and amplify women who don't have those voices? women who don't have that access? What are ways in which we can also remain linked in all of this together? So before I keep going, I want to make sure, I saw some questions kind of coming in, but make sure it'll be most helpful if you put your questions in the Q&A so I can get to them, but I'm also going to roll back through the chat for a few minutes to see. Because there were some things that sounded really important. Oh, I love seeing you all have conversations with each other. This is advocacy. Community is advocacy. Yes. Okay. Can we talk about the ways in which we treat members of our own communities? As a mental health provider and mother, I've worked with many women who report feeling judged and dismissed from people of color in the medical field. This is not a unique experience and something that also needs to be addressed. Absolutely. Right. So while we are advocating for ourselves with non-Black providers, with non-Black community members, with non-Black doulas, any of that, what are ways in which we are also continuing to remain uplifting of each other? I always say that we are our biggest resource, not only individually, but collectively in our communities. Sometimes I say we all we got because the world stresses me out sometimes, but all right, what does it mean to also be a resource within your own community for each other? And to honor, right, your neighbor's journey in this, even though it looks a little bit different than yours and she's doing something differently than you are. How do we remain uplifting of each other so that we still have the foundation there? Other questions? That was a good one. I'm seeing if anything, I don't see anything in the Q&A just yet. Let me see. Oh, you're welcome. I'm still looking for questions. You're welcome. Any other questions about advocacy, boundaries? Oh, there is something in the Q&A. I'm not currently accepting clients, but I have great referrals. Some of them are on this event today, and I more than likely will be accepting clients and having some other events and things this year, so we can absolutely continue this conversation. I see people have dreams of becoming a doula. Yeah. Advocacy also looks like, and I appreciate that comment about becoming a doula. Advocacy also looks like finding other ways into this work. Not everyone's going to be a psychologist. Not everyone's going to be a therapist. Not everyone's going to be a doula, but there can be lactation consultants, right? There are ways in which you can enter this work from all different avenues, and ways in which we can continue to work together. But finding ways into this work can be extremely important. Writing about it in academia, breastfeeding peer counseling. Yes. Finding ways into this work, finding ways into your community. Build a way. They might not always be there for you in these very clear ways. Build a way into this work. People can be mothers, helpers. Oh, I love that. Yes. Okay. How do we reinforce boundaries with people who don't necessarily respect boundaries in general? Great question. Thank you for asking this. And I actually see this as a two-part answer. And so one thing is about how do we reinforce boundaries, right? The second thing is about what happens when people don't respect our boundaries. And I always talk to my clients and any education I provide around boundaries. And there's only one part of this question that you have control over. And that's the boundary setting, and that's the reinforcing of the boundaries. We can't control whether or not people respect them. It still is up to you to reinforce them and to place them and to make sure that they're as clear as you can be about them. And that means reinforcing them verbally. That means reinforcing them in terms of your behavior and acting accordingly to them. Don't set up boundaries and not follow through on the boundary, right? So I'm going to say this, right? Then it's on me to do this afterwards, right? But your other task, your other call to do, right, is that if I'm consistently in relationship with someone who doesn't respect the boundaries, then it's my responsibility to change the nature of the relationship. What might it mean for you to then take a step back and say, hey, if this continues to not be respected, I'm going to move around. I can't remain as close with you if you do not respect my boundaries in general, but that part's on you. Oftentimes we leave it up to the other person. I can offer my boundaries, and then I'm waiting for you to finally respect them. You get to move around before that. You don't have to wait for example after example after example after example of someone not respecting your boundary in order to move around. So I give you permission to move around sooner, pivot sooner, change the access to yourself sooner than that, up to the point that you can. Shameless plug, not so shameless therapy can be super helpful for this. So if you need help with setting boundaries and developing language for your boundaries, I absolutely recommend connecting with a therapist about that. Great question. This is the last question. I don't know. I got some time. I got 5 minutes. What ways have you worked with other healthcare providers to make them understand the need for collaboration with patients rather than the traditional hierarchy, especially among non-Black providers? This is a great question. I think what can be extremely helpful for providers providers within the Black mental health community is to connect. So I connect with different institutions and universities and nurses and labor delivery floors to provide education about this. I'm talking to them about screenings. When do you offer screenings? Why do you not offer screenings at this time? And making recommendations as screenings come immediately. There's a 6-week wait. There's a 12-week checkup, right? The babies are getting all these things when nobody's looking at mom and or family and or partner. So us being able to connect with these other resources that you might see more than likely before you ever see us, to say, hey, this is important. We give you permission and or we recommend that you do this now. Because the recommendations for that they're just absolutely too late. They are really, really too late. Will this recording be available to watch later? I'm not sure. Somebody from PSI can answer that part. Do you provide TED Talks, and would you happen to provide a podcast? If Ted wants to reach out to me for a talk, sure. I do not have a podcast. I run my mouth on everyone else's podcast. So I just did an episode with Keisha Reeves, who you met with before. I've been featured on a number of different podcasts. But I do not have my own, but thank you for asking. Our staff members have an anti-racist journal club, and we are in the middle of medical apartheid. Wonderful, wonderful resource. So the book that this attendee is mentioning is called Medical Apartheid. I highly, highly recommend it, whether or not you're in the field or not. Oh yes, the recording will be available later. We've read Me and White Supremacy. What books would you recommend? And that is by Layla. I forgot Layla's last name, but I'd recommend Me and White Supremacy. I would recommend The Body is Not an Apology by Sonia Renee Taylor. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. I would recommend a book. I would put trigger warning because the title, I think it's supposed to be triggering in these ways. But I recommend a book called Killing the Black Body. I can't remember the author of it, but the book is called Killing the Black Body, and really talks about the experiences across time with Black women's bodies and medicine, and birthing and reproductive justice. I'd highly recommend those 3 books off of the top of my head, but that is a really good question about reading. But like I said, highly recommend The Body is Not an Apology. I also recommend a book that is not focused on Black women's bodies per se, but I do recommend a book called Come As You Are. It can offer really helpful information about the body and how that relates to how you understand it, what we've been taught historically and what we have not been taught, miseducation, as well as just different ways in which to have a newer relationship with your body now that you have some more language for it. What does it, and this will be the last, by Dorothy Roberts. Thank you for that. What does it look like to talk about medical racism with a doctor? What can one say? Great question. And some examples of that can be, so similar to what I was talking about. So not offering language that says like, hey, that this is happening because I am Black. But one way to help navigate how medical racism can show up is asking for Black providers, asking whether your provider has worked with Black women and or Black families in this work, asking if they have not, would they make recommendations for that? Making any mention and kind of making it clear that, hey, I want to know, hey, if I am able to, or if I have any questions about pain that I'm feeling, changes that are happening in my body, would you be willing to answer those questions? can we spend time with you answering those questions? What are ways in which I can access you about what might be happening along this journey, right? Those are ways in which you can stand up in that, which doesn't mean that you have to actually name like, hey, I think you are racist because you are white. If you want to do that, go ahead, but that is not what I'm saying. But ways in which you can continue to assess not only how, I think you can assess how competent they are, but how responsive they will be to your needs. And you get to ask questions about responsiveness to your needs. If they are not available, do they have recommendations for any spaces or any avenues that you can connect with to answer some of your questions if you can't make it to them? Are there people in their office, right? So things like that, to be able to ask not only how can they relate to you, but if they are not and they have the humility to say, yes, I can do this and no, I can't do that, can they make recommendations for exactly what it is that you do need versus viewing themselves as the only person who can help you, right? Those are ways in which you can kind of stand up to how medical racism might show up, right, in the doctor's office. And somebody just mentioned an interview with Sonia Renee Taylor on Brene Brown's podcast about the body is not an apology. I highly, highly recommend that. So that is all from me today. We are right at time. I don't remember what the next segment is, but really enjoyed talking to you all. These are great questions. Feel free to continue reaching out to me. I'll be kind of off and on for the rest of the afternoon. You can find me at ascensionbehavioralhealth.com. You can also find me on Instagram, where I run my mouth the most, at Dr._Ayanna_A. That's at DR_AYANNA_A. And also remain connected with PSI Georgia. I remain connected with them. They're doing a lot of wonderful work. So that's also another avenue to find me and my work and continued conversations around this. Thank you for joining.